The crystalline spires of the stellar conclave chamber soared through the artificial atmosphere, jagged as frozen lightning, each pulsing with the collective consciousness of 1,000 worlds. Elias Varn tugged at his diplomatic collar for the third time, the smart fabric meant to regulate his body heat, doing little to quell the nervous sweat pooling at his neck. Around him, the amphitheater thrummed with life delegates from across the cosmos in a dazzling array of forms. Tentacled Silveras coiled within their shimmering hydropods, their movements liquid and deliberate. Silicon-based Cryon clicked their mineral joints in rhythmic cadence, while ethereal Phalith drifted like sentient auroras, their glow casting faint rainbows across the chamber. "You're fidgeting again," whispered Lyricade, his human intern, her voice a fragile thread beneath the hum of universal translators, harmonizing in 100 tongues. Clutching her data pad like a shield, she was fresh from Earth's diplomatic academy, her eyes wide with the spectacle of interspecies politics. "I always fidget when they're about to sell someone," Elias muttered, his jaw tight with defiance. At 28, he was young for a diplomat, but his brazen approach to galactic affairs had somehow earned him a seat in this cosmic theater. Today, though, he wished he had stayed in bed. The central platform ascended from the chamber's floor, and a heavy silence draped the assembly like a shroud. Upon it stood a figure who stilled even the most exotic beings. Queen Saris Veera of the Vaerith Empire, a vision as breathtaking as a gathering storm, raw power cloaked in terrible beauty. Her skin shimmered with an opalescent sheen shifting from deep amethyst to midnight sapphire, her forearms folded in the regal stance of Vaerith royalty. But it was her 6 eyes that seized Elias's attention, arranged in perfect symmetry across her elongated face, each reflecting a unique spectrum of light. In those eyes, he glimpsed what others missed, rage tightly leashed behind millennia of breeding and protocol. Honored delegates began Administrator Terrell Vox, a Vaerith official, whose forearms gestured with mechanical precision, his voice carrying the weary cadence of a speech given too many times. "We convene for the 47th Reproductive Alliance auction. The Vaerith genetic line demands meticulous cultivation to preserve our species' unparalleled traits." Elias's stomach churned. They called it a reproductive alliance, but the truth was uglier, a bidding war to claim Vaerith genetics for another species' lineage. Queen Saris wasn't just royalty. She was a commodity, her DNA mapped and cataloged like cargo in a starport warehouse. "The base offer opens at 300 million universal credits." Terrell continued, "plus preferred trading status with the Vaerith Empire for the next solar century. Her Majesty's genetic compatibility has been confirmed with 17 species, with an offspring viability rate of 89.3%. Numbers danced across the chamber's massive holo displays. The Morghath delegation surged forward with a bid of 350 million. The Zephyr Collective countered, offering mining rights to 2 asteroid fields. Elias was on his feet before his mind caught up, his voice slicing through the chaos of bids. "This is insane," he declared, the universal translators amplifying his words in a cacophony of languages. The chamber fell deathly still. Thousands of eyes compound, simple, stalked, and glowing, fixing on the young human diplomat. Terrell's mandibles clicked in irritation. "The Earth representative is out of order. Your species lacks the resources or genetic compatibility to participate in this auction." Elias's voice grew steadier, defiance burning through his fear. "I'm not here to bid. I'm here to stop it." Gasps echoed through the assembly. Lyra tugged at his sleeve, her face ashen. "Elias, sit down. You'll get us thrown out of the conclave." But he was already moving, striding toward the central platform, his heart pounding like a war drum. "You're treating a person like a prize at some backwater fair. She's not a product. She's a sentient being. The human clearly doesn't grasp Vaerith culture." Terrell sneered, his tone dripping with condescension. "Our queen serves her people through genetic propagation. It is the highest honor." Elias locked eyes with Queen Saris. "Is it your majesty? When was the last time anyone asked what you wanted?" Her 6 eyes widened slightly, a flicker of emotion breaking through her regal mask. Her voice when she spoke was silk drawn over a blade. "What I want is irrelevant. I am the vessel of 10,000 years of selective breeding. I am not an individual, I am a resource." "Bullshit," Elias said bluntly, the vulgarity mangling in translation, sparking confused murmurs. "Sorry, I mean that's nonsense. You're a person with thoughts, feelings, dreams. Just because your society's convinced you otherwise doesn't make it true. Ambassador Crexes of the Dominion leaned forward, his scaled hide rippling with dark amusement. The human infant dares lecture us on civilization. Your species still slaughters each other over skin tones and imaginary lines. Elias spread his hands unapologetic. Yeah, we're messy, violent, chaotic, and God help us, we put pineapple on pizza. But we don't auction off our leaders like relics on the Galactic Trade Network. A few delegates laughed, a raw, genuine sound that cut through the diplomatic veneer. Elias pressed forward, momentum building. Every species here has something they cherish. The Silveras have their philosophy pools, the Cryon, their crystal symphonies. Humans, we're proud of our stubbornness of saying no when the universe demands yes. And right now I'm saying no to this. Terrell's mandibles snapped in fury. You have no authority here, human. Earth is a fledgling member of the conclave, barely free of its gravitational cradle. You exist here at our sufferance. Then kick us out. Elias shot back, his voice ringing with reckless conviction. Ban our ships, revoke our membership. But I won't stand here and watch you sell a person queen, or not, like she's a futures contract. The Morgath ambassador loomed, its insectoid form towering 3 meters on spindly legs. The human presumes much. Perhaps a taste of Morgath's strength will remind him of his place. Elias didn't flinch, though every instinct screamed to run. I know my place, right here, saying what no one else will. This is wrong. Queen Sarah stirred for the first time, one lower arm rising in a Vaerith gesture for silence. The chamber obeyed instantly, the air heavy with anticipation. You would risk your world standing for a principle, she asked, her tone laced with genuine curiosity. Elias met her gaze unflinching. I'd risk it for a person. For you don't even know me, she countered. I know enough. I know you're standing there being sold to the highest bidder, expected to smile and accept it. That's bullshit, no matter what planet you're from. Her 6 eyes studied him, each seeming to pierce a different layer of his soul. And what would you propose, human? That I abandon my duty, let my genetic line fade, and doom my species to stagnation? I propose you get a choice, Elias said simply. If you want an alliance, make one. If you want children, have them. But it should be your call, not some auction item number 47. Terrell interjected, his voice sharp. The human speaks of choice as if it exists in a vacuum. The Queen's decisions affect billions. The Vaerith Empire rests on the continuation of her genome. Then maybe it's time to rethink your system, Elias suggested. Earth used to marry off monarchs for alliances too. We outgrew it. You can too, a Phalith delegate's voice chimed like wind chimes. Outgrew it? You mean descended into chaos and crude democracy? Evolved, Elias corrected, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Democracy's messy. We once elected a reality TV star, and that was about as fun as you'd imagine. But at least our leaders choose their own partners. The bidding board hung frozen, its glowing numbers a silent testament to the historic pause. Elias felt the weight of history pressing down. He was either about to reshape the galaxy or torch humanity's fragile place in it. Queen Saris descended from the platform, her movements fluid as starlight despite her towering 3-meter frame. Elias craned his neck to hold her gaze, her skin shimmering with patterns like distant nebulae. You speak with fire, human, she said, her voice low and resonant. But fire without power is just noise. What can you offer beyond words? Elias swallowed, his throat dry. Respect for your autonomy. The one thing no one else here is willing to give. Autonomy. She tasted the word as if it were alien, a luxury I cannot afford. Can't you? You're the queen. If you can't choose, who can? You know nothing of our ways, then teach me. Elias urged, surprising himself with his audacity. Let's talk not as diplomat and queen, but as two people searching for a better path. The silence stretched taut as a wire until Saris turned to the assembly. The auction is postponed, she declared, her voice commanding absolute obedience. Chaos erupted, delegates shouting in a dozen tongues, some demanding the auction resume, others calling for Elias's expulsion. Terrell looked as if he might combust, his mandibles trembling. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. The contracts, the agreements. We'll wait, Saris cut in. I invoke my right of contemplation, 72 standard hours as law allows. She turned to Elias, a flicker of something amusement in her eyes. You have 3 days, human. Convince me there's another way, or the auction proceeds. Thank you, Elias managed, his voice unsteady. Don't thank me yet, she warned, her tone carrying a galaxy's weight. You've made powerful enemies today. Diplomatic immunity only stretches so far. As security herded the stunned delegates out, Lyra appeared at Elias's side, looking as if she'd aged a decade in minutes. Do you have any idea what you've done? She hissed. Started a conversation, Elias said weakly, trying for humor. You challenged the entire socio-economic framework of one of the galaxy's mightiest empires with a speech about choice, Lyra shot back. That's either the dumbest or bravest thing I've ever seen, maybe both. Ambassador Crexus slithered past, baring his fangs in a venomous glare. You've doomed your species, human. Earth will pay for your arrogance. Get in line, Elias muttered. We've been dooming ourselves since we discovered fire. As the chamber emptied, Elias stood alone on the main floor, staring up at the crystalline spires. They no longer gleamed like frozen lightning. They looked like the bars of an exquisite cage. What have I gotten myself into? He murmured to the empty air. A voice answered from behind, where Queen Ceres lingered, her retinue gone. Something far more intricate than you can fathom. Elias Varn. He turned, struck anew by her otherworldly beauty. You know my name. I know many things, she said, her words deliberate, including that your rebellion today has likely painted a target on your back. The Morghath do not forgive, and the Varith Council. She paused, choosing her words with care. They see me as property. You've essentially tried to steal an asset worth more than your solar system. I call it aggressive negotiation, Elias quipped, daring a grin. She laughed, a sound like starlight breaking into octaves no human throat could touch. You're either fearless or a fool, she said. Percol Lodos, Elias replied, then caught himself. Sorry. Earth phrase means why not both? Apt, she said, her 6 eyes dissecting him without contact. Tell me, Elias Varn, what do you know of Varith history? The basics, he admitted. Ancient empire obsessed with genetic cultivation, 4-armed humanoids with genius intellects and lives spanning 300 Earth years. Surface knowledge, she said softly. Do you know why we began the auctions? He shook his head. We were dying, Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. A genetic bottleneck 1,000 years ago left us with fewer than 10,000 breeding individuals. The auctions weren't just about wealth or power, they were about survival. Elias frowned. That was a millennium ago. Surely your population's recovered? In numbers, yes. In diversity? She shook her head, her skin shimmering with sorrow. We've become too refined, too specialized. Each generation breeds true, but we've lost the chaos that fuels evolution. We're fossils preserved in genetic amber. The auctions bring new material, yes, but they also cement our value to others, too vital to destroy, too powerful to conquer. Other species. We're too formidable to conquer, too indispensable to destroy. The auctions keep us untouchable. Elias processed her words, his diplomat's mind racing through the tangled web of implications. But you personally don't need to be auctioned. There must be other Varith who could contribute genetic diversity. None with the royal markers, Sarah said, her voice heavy with inevitability. I carry sequences unseen in our species for half a millennium. I am quite literally irreplaceable. That's a hell of a burden, Elias said, searching for words that wouldn't sound trite. One I was bred to bear. She drifted to the viewing wall, her gaze lost in the starfield's endless expanse, each point of light a world bound to her duty. From birth I was taught I wasn't an individual, just a vessel for Varith's future. Every choice I made was weighed against its impact on our genetic legacy. That sounds lonely. Elias ventured, his voice soft, almost afraid to break the moment. She turned, surprise flickering across her alien features, her 6 eyes catching the light like prisms. Lonely. No one's ever named it before. Her voice trembled, a crack in her regal facade. Can I ask something? Maybe wildly inappropriate, Elias said, emboldened by the rawness of the moment. She tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. You've already upended a millennium-old tradition and defied the stellar conclave. Propriety's long gone. What do you want to know? Not your species, not your council. You, Ceres. What does Ceres want? Silence stretched heavy and profound, as if he'd crossed an unseen threshold. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper, fragile as a dying star. I want to watch a sunset without calculating its spectral values for breeding optimization. I want to savor food without dissecting its nutrients for genetic expression. I want, she hesitated, the words alien to her tongue. I want to choose someone because I desire them, not because our DNA aligns. That doesn't seem like too much to ask, Elias said softly. For your species, maybe. For mine. She gestured to the empty chamber, its crystalline walls echoing with the memory of chaos. You saw how they reacted to a mere postponement. What do you think they'd do if I refused outright? Replace you. There is no replacement, she said, her voice sharp with truth. There are cousins with diluted bloodlines, but none carry the full royal genome. If I refuse, our genetic diversity project collapses. Trillions in trade agreements vanish. Worlds reliant on Varith tech suffer. So you're trapped. We're all trapped, Elias Varn, she said, her eyes locking onto his. The only difference is the size and comfort of our cages. Elias stepped closer, drawn by a pull. He couldn't name a mix of empathy and defiance. What if we made the cage bigger? Meaning, I don't know yet, he admitted, his voice earnest. But you gave me 72 hours to figure it out. I'm damn well going to use them. And if you fail, then at least someone tried. That's got to count for something. She reached out with a lower arm, her gesture tentative, her multi-jointed fingers brushing his shoulder with surprising gentleness. You'll die for this, you know. If not in these 3 days, then after. The powers you've challenged don't forgive. Maybe, Elias said, flashing the grin that had both saved and damned him throughout his career. But I've got a secret weapon I'm too stubborn to quit. That's not a weapon, she countered, her tone dry. It's a character flaw. On Earth, we call it determination. What do you call it on Varith? Evolutionary disadvantage. Despite the stakes, Elias laughed, the sound echoing in the vast chamber. See, we're already finding common ground. A chime rang out sharp and urgent, signaling the chamber would seal in 10 minutes. Sarah straightened her queenly demeanor, snapping back into place, though a trace of vulnerability lingered. Return to your quarters, she said. The next 72 hours will test you. Many will try to sway you from this path. Will you, Elias asked, searching her eyes. I haven't decided, she admitted, moving toward the exit before pausing. A word of advice, Laz Varn. If you're serious about this fool's errand, trust no one, not your delegation, not your intern, and certainly not me. Why warn me if I shouldn't trust you? Because she said, turning back, her expression unreadable, yet piercing, you're the first to see me as more than my genetic code. That's either worth protecting or too dangerous to allow. I haven't decided which. She swept from the chamber, leaving Elias alone with the weight of his actions, the air heavy with the consequences he'd unleashed. As the lights dimmed, the automated systems sealing the space, he muttered, definitely too stubborn to quit, and headed for the exit. The corridors of the conclave station were a marvel of engineering, built to accommodate species of wildly different needs. Elias passed through methane-filled sections for the Gassarian zones of crushing pressure, for Hydro 6's deep dwellers, and segments flickering in multiple dimensions for beings he could barely perceive. His quarters, tucked in the human sector, were a modest cluster of rooms with Earth's gravity and air. As he neared his door, Lyra stood waiting, her face a mix of awe and exasperation. They're calling an emergency session of Earth's diplomatic corps, she said, falling into step as he entered. Ambassador Halverson wants your head on a platter, possibly literally. She's been cozying up to the Morgath. Let me guess, Elias said, collapsing onto his couch, exhaustion crashing over him. I've humiliated humanity and set back our integration by centuries, per her latest tirade. Lyra nodded, a wry smile tugging at her lips. She used words I didn't know she knew. I think she picked up some from the Cryon delegation. The adrenaline that had fueled Elias's defiance ebbed, leaving cold reality in its wake. Was I wrong, Lyra? Did I just burn everything down for a principle that might not even translate across species? Lyra sat across from him, her young face earnest. Can I be honest? You're absolutely insane. You've picked a fight with powers that could wipe Earth off the star charts without a second thought. You've challenged traditions older than our civilization, all for someone you barely know, but she softened, a small smile breaking through. You're also right. What they were doing in there, it's wrong in a way that cuts through species or culture. Someone had to say it, even if it costs us everything, especially then. What's the point of joining the galactic community if we have to abandon our humanity to do it? A chime at the door cut through their conversation. Elias checked the security feed and frowned. Speaking of abandoning humanity, Ambassador Halverson stormed in like a force of nature, her pristine suit and perfectly styled hair at odds with the fury radiating from her. Two security officers flanked the doorway. Varn, she spat his name a curse. Do you have any idea what you've done? Expressed an opinion. Elias offered his tone, deliberately light. You've obliterated 2 decades of delicate negotiations, trade deals, tech exchanges, colonial permits, all jeopardized because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. They were selling a person, Ambassador, Elias said, his voice hardening. A legal transaction by their customs. Halverson snapped her words cold enough to freeze stars. It's not our place to judge. Then whose is it? Elias countered. No one's. That's the point of diplomatic immunity and cultural respect. We don't interfere, especially when it's wrong by our standards. The galaxy doesn't run on human morality, Varn. Maybe it should, Elias said quietly, his conviction unwavering. Just a little. Halverson's laugh was bitter-cutting. Arrogant child. You think humanity's special? We're newcomers, barely free of our gravity well. We exist here on sufferance, and you've given them every reason to revoke it. If our place in the galaxy means standing by while people are sold like cattle, maybe it's not worth having, people. Halverson's voice dripped contempt. She's not people, Varn. She's Vaerith, different species, different rules. She has thoughts, feelings, desires, Elias said. That makes her a person in my book. Your book's about to burn along with your career and maybe your life. Halverson turned to the officers. Escort Mr. Varn to detention. No outside contact until this mess is sorted. On what charges? Lyra demanded, standing. Endangering Earth's security through reckless diplomacy. It's in the charter, look it up. The officers stepped forward, but Elias raised a hand. Wait, the Queen gave me 72 hours. I have diplomatic standing during that time. Only in the conclave chambers, Halverson sneered. Your actions here fall under Earth's jurisdiction. Actually, the new voice cut in cool and precise. They don't. A tall, thin figure stood in the doorway, gray skin marking them as a neutrality officer, genetically engineered to lack bias. I am arbitrator Zixara, they announced. Queen Saris has extended personal diplomatic protection to Elias Varn for the contemplation period. Any attempt to detain him would be an act of aggression against the Vaerith Empire. Halverson's face cycled through shades of rage before settling on a sickly purple. She can't do that. She can and has, Zixara confirmed, their tone unyielding. Mr. Varn is under Vaerith jurisdiction for the next 72 hours. I suggest you respect it unless Earth wishes to face sanctions. This isn't over, Halverson snarled at Elias. When those 3 days are up, you'll answer for this. She stormed out, her security detail trailing like shadows. Zixara lingered, their dispassionate gaze studying Elias. You should know the Queen's protection has upon. You're considered her property for the duration of this period. Her property, Elias echoed, incredulous. Isn't that what we're fighting against? Ironic, isn't it? A flicker of what might have been amusement crossed Zixara's face. To save her from being sold, you've let yourself be temporarily owned. She wishes to see you immediately. Now it's the middle of the sleep cycle. Queens don't sleep during contemplation periods. Nor it seems, will you? Elias glanced at Lyra, who shrugged helplessly. Go, she said. I'll handle damage control here. Be careful, Elias warned. Halverson might. I'll be fine, Lyra interrupted. I'm too junior to be worth her wrath. Go save the galaxy or whatever you're doing. Elias followed Zixara through opulent corridors he'd never seen, each more breathtaking than the last, leading to the heart of the station where the founding species held their embassies. The Vaerith section was a masterpiece of controlled beauty walls, shifting between opacity and transparency, revealing glimpses of impossible gardens and crystalline waterfalls that seemed to defy gravity. They reached a door carved from a single massive pearl, its surface gleaming like a captured moon. Zixara gestured for him to enter. Good luck, Mr. Varn. You'll need it. The door dissolved at his approach, revealing a chamber that defied physics, intimate yet vast, its walls stretching into infinity while feeling close enough to touch. Queen Saris stood at its center, stripped of her formal regalia, her presence somehow more real, more vulnerable. You came, she said, her voice softer than he'd expected. Did I have a choice? Apparently, I'm your property now. A necessary fiction, she replied, her eyes glinting with faint amusement. Without it, you'd be in an Earth detention cell by now. So you protected me. I protected my investment, she corrected. You've started something unstoppable. Either we find a solution, or we both face the fallout. No pressure, Elias said, attempting levity. She almost smiled. You hide behind humor. Better than hiding behind a shield. Those things are heavy. Sit, she commanded, gesturing to cushions that rose from the floor at her thought molding perfectly to his form. We have much to discuss and little time. Elias sat marveling at the alien tech. Where do we start? With truth, Sarah said, settling across from him with liquid grace. Tell me, Elias Varn, why do you care what happens to me? The question hit like a pulse blast, unguarded and raw. I don't know, he admitted, his voice faltering. When I saw you up there, discussed like a commodity futures contract, something in me snapped. It was wrong on a level that cuts through species, through politics. I couldn't stay silent, even knowing the cost. Especially knowing the cost. If we can't stand for basic dignity, what's the point of all this? Can't stand up for basic dignity? What's the point of all this? Elias gestured at the station around them, its gleaming tech in intricate corridors, a hollow backdrop. The trade deals, the alliances, the wonders of this galaxy, none of it means a damn thing if we lose our souls in the process. Souls? Ceres echoed, her voice tasting the human concept like an unfamiliar spice. Varith believe in genetic legacy, the preservation of traits through calculated breeding. Sounds lonely as hell, Elias said, his tone soft but piercing. You keep circling back to loneliness. He weighed his words, feeling the weight of her gaze. Because I've known it. Different reasons, different stakes, but I know what it's like to be surrounded by faces and feel utterly alone. And when I look at you, really look, I see that same isolation like a star cut off from its constellation. You presume much, she said, but her voice lacked rebuke. Am I wrong? Silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, she whispered, No, you're not wrong. They sat in the quiet, her admission a fragile bridge between their worlds. At last, Sarah spoke again, her tone resolute. The conclave will reconvene in 60 hours to hear your alternative to the auction. Do you have one? Not yet, Elias admitted, his honesty raw. But I will. Such confidence. Not confidence, desperation. There's a difference. Indeed, she said, rising to approach a window that wasn't a window, its surface shimmering with views of countless star systems. Tell me about Earth, not the data, not the history. What does it feel like to be human? The question caught him off guard, but Elias answered from the heart, painting a vivid picture. He spoke of sunrises that set the sky ablaze, the bitter warmth of coffee on a cold morning, music that could break your heart, and jokes that left you gasping with laughter. He described rain kissing, bare skin, the decadent melt of chocolate, and humanity's strange knack for finding beauty in broken things. Saris listened with an intensity that felt almost tangible, her 6 eyes locked on him, each cataloging a facet of his words, like prisms, catching light. You speak of chaos as if it's beautiful, she said when he paused, her voice tinged with wonder. It is, Elias replied. Messy, unpredictable, sometimes painful, but alive. Real. Worth fighting for. And you think I'm missing that? I think your whole species is, he said gently. You've refined yourselves into genetic perfection. But what's the cost? What have you lost in the pursuit of safety and stability? Purpose? She countered, but her voice wavered. Life isn't meant to be safe, Elias said, his words fierce yet kind. It's meant to be lived. Easy for you to say. She shot back, a spark of defiance in her eyes. Your species breeds like roaches, no offense. None taken, he grinned. We're enthusiastic about it. If we screw up, lose some genetic diversity, humanity keeps going. But if you make a mistake, your whole lineage could end. I get that pressure, or at least I'm trying to. You can't, she said, her honesty cutting. But I understand no one should bear it alone, Dow. I'm not alone, she said, gesturing vaguely. I have advisors, genetic counselors, the weight of Varith history, but friends, Elias pressed. Anyone who sees Saris, not just the queen. She turned from the star field, and for the first time vulnerability softened her alien features. Her skin, shimmering like a nebula, caught in twilight. No, I don't. Then let me be the first, he offered, his voice steady despite the leap. You barely know me. So let's fix that. We've got 60 hours to save your autonomy, and probably my life. Might as well spend it getting to know each other. She stepped closer, her towering frame casting a shadow that made Elias acutely aware of their differences. You're either the bravest human I've met or the most foolish. Still betting on both, he said, flashing a grin. It's worked so far. Has it? Her voice held a challenge. You've alienated your people, defied the stellar conclave, and placed yourself under my protection, which by Varith law means I could command your every move and you'd have to obey. You won't, Elias said with quiet certainty. How do you know? Because you're not the monster they've convinced you are. You're a person who deserves choices, even the hard ones. And if you choose the auction, if duty outweighs desire, that's your call, but it should be yours, not theirs. She reached out her upper arm, more expressive than the functional lower ones, hovering near his face, fingers tracing the air without touching. You're strange, Elias Varn. I prefer unique. Unique, then, she said, a smile breaking through, softening her alien beauty into something almost reachable. And possibly the key to everything or its ruin. No pressure, Elias said weakly, earning a laugh that warmed the room. I'm starting to see why humans are so dangerous. Despite your limits, you're unpredictable. We call it spontaneous, he corrected. Anything about your species, you don't rephrase. We're damn good at marketing, he admitted. It's how we convince the galaxy we're worth talking to. A soft chime interrupted, and Saris's expression hardened. The conclave is already mobilizing. 3 delegations have requested audiences with me. Let me guess, they want you to ignore the crazy human and proceed with the auction. More likely they want to raise their bids, she said dryly. Your stunt made me seem valuable, someone worth fighting for. That wasn't the plan. Plans rarely survive reality's first strike, she said, moving toward the door. Rest. Tomorrow the real battle begins. What kind of research? If we're to propose an alternative to the auction system, it must be viable economically, genetically. I've granted you access to our archives, the full history of why the auctions began and how they evolved. Homework. Awesome, Elias said, feigning enthusiasm. Would you prefer a physical challenge? I could arrange a duel with the Morghath champion. Archives sound perfect, he backtracked, grinning. Thought so. She paused at the door. Elias, yeah, thank you. Even if this ends in spectacular failure, thank you for seeing me as more than my DNA. Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving him in a chamber that felt too vast, too alien. Exhaustion hit like a plasma blast. In a day, he'd gone from minor diplomat to galactic troublemaker, challenging powers that could crush Earth without blinking. For what, a woman he'd just met? A principle that might not cross species? No, for the simple truth that everyone deserved a choice, human, Varith or otherwise. His communicator buzzed with messages, Earth officials, diplomats, even news outlets sniffing out the story. He ignored them, too drained to care. Tomorrow would bring its own wars. Tonight, he needed to process. As Zixara escorted him back to his quarters, Elias replayed his talk with Saris. The loneliness in her voice, the crushing weight of her duty, the faint spark of hope when he offered friendship. She was desperate for connection, but too guarded to reach for it. You're going to try to save her, Zixara, observed, their voice neutral as they walked. Is it that obvious? You have the look of someone who's made a reckless choice they know is unwise. Story of my life. Most would call that a flaw. What do you call it? Zixara paused, considering. Insufficient data. Ask me in 70 hours. At his quarters, Lyra waited with coffee and a grim look. How bad is it? Elias asked, taking a cup gratefully. On a scale of 1 to 10, about a 15, she activated a holographic display, news feeds blazing to life. It's gone viral. Human diplomat disrupts ancient alien tradition. Hero or villain depends on the network. What's Earth saying officially? They're distancing themselves, stopping just short of disowning you. Unofficially, Halverson wants your head, but there's a growing faction that thinks you're right, and the other species, mixed bag. Younger civilizations are intrigued. Some are reviewing their own traditions. The older ones, she grimaced. Let's just say the founding 5 aren't inviting you to dinner. Elias sipped his coffee, the bitter warmth grounding him. Any good news? Define good. Not catastrophic. We're not expelled from the conclave yet, and human tourism applications are spiking. Apparently, people want to see the species crazy enough to challenge a thousand-year tradition. Great, we're a sideshow, Elias said, half laughing. Better than target practice. They spent an hour sorting through messages, mapping the political fallout. It was worse than he'd feared, but better than he'd hoped. The galaxy was watching, waiting. Exhaustion finally won, and Elias sent Lyra to rest, collapsing into bed still clothed. One thought haunted him as he drifted off 3 days to shift galactic history. No pressure. The Varith archives were nothing like Elias expected, no dusty tomes or sterile databases, but a chamber where memories hung in the air like living ghosts. Gossamer threads of light wove between floating nodes, each pulsing with centuries of knowledge. Touch nothing without permission, warned his guide keeper Theralis, a lower caste Varith, whose careful movements spoke of a life spent guarding irreplaceable relics. These memories respond to intent. One wrong thought could corrupt millennia of data. No pressure, Elias muttered, earning a puzzled glance. His catchphrase didn't translate well. The Queen has granted you access to the origin protocols, Theralis said, gesturing to a cluster of ancient nodes that glowed dim with age. No off-worlder has ever been given this privilege. Lucky me, Elias said dryly. Luck has nothing to do with it, Theralis replied. You've either impressed her deeply or doomed yourself spectacularly. Why not both? Theralis' four eyes blinked in a pattern Elias was starting to read his amusement. You humans always chasing multiple outcomes at once. It's called optimism. We call it probability dysfunction. As Theralis left him alone, Elias approached a node, his heart pounding. The moment his fingers brushed it, the world exploded into sensation, not his own, but memories of Varith long dead. He stood on a dying world, its sky bleeding purple radiation, the ground fracturing under ecological collapse. Through borrowed eyes, he watched as the last fertile Varith were cataloged, their genes preserved in crystalline matrices. 10,000, a voice echoed through time. 10,000 out of billions. We're witnessing our end. The memory shifted to a sterile lab, Varith scientists racing against extinction, poring over genetic sequences. The diversity's too limited, one said. Inbreeding will end us in 5 generations. Then we look outward, another urged. Other species, other genes. Blasphemy, survival. The first corrected, if we must evolve into something new, that's evolution's command. Memories flooded through tentative genetic exchanges with other species, failures yielding lifeless offspring, rare successes weaving new traits into the Varith genome. Through it all, a grim truth emerged. Survival came at a cost. We can't force others to breed with us, a long-dead leader declared. But we can make ourselves invaluable, our tech, our knowledge, our genes as currency. A dissenting voice rose. Better products than corpses. The memory stream ended, leaving Elias gasping, his hands trembling. He hadn't just seen history, he'd felt it, the desperation, the fear, the bitter acceptance of an impossible choice. Intense, isn't it? Elias spun to find Saris in the doorway, no longer clad in royal regalia, but in a flowing garment that shifted colors with her mood, casual, yet unmistakably regal. That's one word for it, he managed, still reeling. I just lived through your apocalypse. That's one word for it. Elias managed, his voice hoarse, still reeling from the visceral weight of Varith's ancient collapse. I just lived through your apocalypse. Sarah stepped into the archive chamber, her presence making the memory nodes flare brighter, as if drawn to her royal essence. Now you see why the auctions exist. We didn't choose this path lightly. But that was 1,000 years ago, Elias countered, his mind still swimming with echoes of a dying world. You've recovered. In numbers, yes, she said, her tone heavy with truth, but not in diversity, Elias. Every Varith alive today traces their lineage to those 10,000 survivors. We walk a tightrope over extinction, one misstep from oblivion. She glided deeper into the room, the nodes pulsing in rhythm with her steps. But that's not why I'm here. I've had visitors, several in fact. The other bidders, and worse, my own council. She touched a node and it projected a hologram of Elder Varith, their faces carved with age and authority, their forearms rigid with judgment. They've issued an ultimatum, she continued. Proceed with the auction in 48 hours, or they'll declare me genetically compromised and crown my cousin as queen. Can they do that? Elias asked, his stomach tightening. If the council votes unanimously, yes. And they will. My cousin Kavara is a traditionalist. She'd never challenged the auction system. So we're running out of time, Elias said, the weight of the deadline pressing down. We have exactly as much time as I choose to grant, Sarah said, her voice steel-wrapped in velvet. I am still queen despite their threats. She fixed him with her 6 unsettling eyes, their prismatic gaze cutting through him. Why are you risking so much for this? For me, Elias shook his head at a loss. Do you know my first memory, she asked before he could answer. He shook his head, getting caught in the gravity of her words. Being tested, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was 3 cycles old, about 4 of your years. They pricked my skin, drew my blood, scanned my genetic code. They told me I was special, that I carried markers unseen for centuries. Her gaze drifted, lost in memory. Do you know what a 4-year-old thinks when she's told she's special? That she's loved? Instead, I learned I was different, alone, set apart. She moved to another node, its glow pulsing with newer, sharper memories. Every friendship I tried to forge was scrutinized for genetic compatibility. Every passion I explored was measured for its breeding potential. I wasn't raised Elias, I was cultivated. That's abuse, he said, his voice thick with outrage. That's tradition, she corrected, her tone, flat but heavy. Every queen before me endured the same. It's how we keep the royal line pure enough to be valuable, yet diverse enough to be viable. It's still wrong. She turned to him, and for the first time he saw tears, or the Verith equivalent silvery trails, weaving intricate patterns down her opalescent cheeks. That's what sets you apart, she said softly. Others see the benefits and accept my suffering as the cost. You see the cost and reject the benefits. I don't reject the benefits, Elias clarified, his voice earnest. I just believe there's another way to achieve them. Then find it, she challenged, her eyes blazing with desperate hope. You have 36 hours before my council acts. Show me another path or watch me vanish into a breeding contract that scatters my genes across the galaxy. Saris, don't, he started, but she raised a hand, cutting him off. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't offer comfort you can't sustain. Just find another way. Her departure was sudden, like a star winking out, leaving the chamber colder, emptier. Elias stood among the floating nodes, her challenge a weight on his shoulders. 36 hours to upend a 1,000-year system. 36 hours to save not just a queen, but a person who'd never been allowed to be one. He dove back into the archives with fierce determination, focusing on the economics of the auction system. The numbers were staggering, trillions of credits flowing between worlds, entire economies tethered to the genetic trade. But as he dug deeper, a pattern emerged, one that set his pulse racing. Lyra, you need to see this, he said into his communicator. His intern's hologram flickered to life, her face bleary from sleep. Elias, it's 0300 hours, she groaned. I've found something, he pressed, urgencies overriding guilt. The auction revenues, they're not going where everyone thinks. What do you mean? Lyra asked, instantly alert. He shared his display, revealing a labyrinth of financial transactions. Everyone assumes the credits fund Verith's social programs, infrastructure, defense. But trace the flow. Lyra's eyes widened. Oh my God, it's going to private accounts. The council members, they're enriching themselves. Exactly. Elias said, his voice grim. The whole survival of the species argument. It might have been true once, but now it's just profit. They're selling their queen to line their pockets. Can you prove it? I'm standing in their archives, he said. Every transaction's here, buried under layers of bureaucracy, but it's here. His mind raced, the implications electrifying. This changes everything. If we can prove the auctions aren't about survival anymore, the moral argument gets teeth. It's not tradition or necessity. Lyra finished, her voice sharp with realization. It's greed. Exactly. Can you start compiling this into a presentation? The conclave can't ignore. Already on it, she said. I'll have something in 12 hours. But Elias, this is dangerous. If they're profiting, they won't let go without a fight. Let them try, he said, defiance flaring. What are they going to do? Auction me too? Don't give them ideas, Lyra said, her tone serious despite the jest. Just don't start any more galactic incidents before I'm done. No promises. As her hologram faded, Elias sensed a presence. Keeper Theralis stood in the shadows, all 4 eyes fixed on him. You heard, Elias said. It wasn't a question. I've known for decades, Theralis admitted, his voice low. But knowing and proving are worlds apart, and proof means nothing without the courage to wield it. Why didn't you, Elias asked. Because I'm fourth caste, Theralis said, bitterness creeping in. My voice carries no weight. My genetic markers are common, my breeding potential negligible. I exist to tend these archives, nothing more. That's not true, Elias countered. You're a person with knowledge, conviction, fear. Fear, Theralis echoed. The council controls more than breeding rights human. They control food housing, even the air we breathe. Challenge them and you risk not just yourself, but everyone you've ever cared for. But if no one challenges them, nothing changes, Elias said, his voice steady. Spoken like someone with nothing to lose, Thar. Rallis replied, I have everything to lose, Elias said. My career, my world standing, my life. But some things are worth the risk. Theralis studied him, his four eyes unreadable. You care about her, the queen. I care about what's right. The two aren't mutually exclusive. The keeper moved deeper into the archives, beckoning Elias to follow. If you're serious about this insane plan, there's something you need to see. They entered a section that felt heavier, older, the air thick with forgotten history. The nodes here glowed dimly, their light subdued. Forbidden memories, Theralis explained. Records from before Varith's collapse when we were whole. The council banned them centuries ago, claiming they were too painful, too dangerous to our order. But you have access, Elias said. I maintain all archives, forbidden or otherwise. The council never imagined a keeper would dare share them. Theralis touched a node, then stepped back. This will hurt. These memories are raw. Elias braced himself and made contact. Instantly, he was swept into a Varith that stole his breath, cities alive with song parks where castes mingled freely, art that defied description. Beyond the beauty was a feeling, pure, unfiltered joy. He saw Varith choosing partners for love, for shared dreams, not genetic compatibility. Children were raised by communities cherished for their unique gifts, not their breeding potential. A civilization that balanced progress with happiness. We were artists once, a voice whispered through time. Poets, dreamers, lovers. We chose connection over perfection, and we were glorious. The memory shifted, revealing the beginning of the end, environmental collapse from over-industrialization, resources drained by relentless growth, ecosystems crumbling. Voices clashed over solutions. We must control breeding, one faction insisted. Limit population, optimize genetics. We must change our ways, another countered. Live in harmony with our world. The first faction prevailed. Breeding programs began before the final collapse, turning love into statistics. When the environment failed, genetic control was already entrenched, emergency measures hardening into tradition. Elias tore himself from the node, human tears streaming down his face. They had a choice. They could have chosen differently. Every species faces such choices, Theralis said quietly. Varith chose survival over spirit. We live, but do we truly live? The queen needs to see this, Elias urged. It could break her, Theralis warned. She carries enough pain. Or it could free her, Elias countered. Show her another way existed and could again. Theralis' expression was unreadable. You have more faith in change than anyone I've met. Someone has to, Elias said. The hours blurred as he dove into economic models tracing the auction system's credit flows. The truth confirmed his suspicions. The auctions generated vast wealth, but only a fraction reached species preservation. The rest vanished into private accounts, shell companies, and lavish luxuries for the elite. Meanwhile, Lyra worked from the human quarters, weaving data into a presentation even the most stubborn conclave member couldn't dismiss. She also deflected frantic calls from Earth's diplomatic corps, buying Elias time with clever bureaucratic dodges and malfunctioning comms. Halverson's threatening to court-martial me for aiding you, she reported during a check-in. I blamed solar interference. There's no solar interference, Elias pointed out. She doesn't know that, Lyra said with a grin. Politics major, not astrophysics. As the 36-hour deadline loomed, Elias had built a damning case against the auction system. But data alone wasn't enough. He needed to sway hearts to make the conclave see Ceres as more than a genetic asset. Inspiration came from an unlikely source. You look like hell. Ambassador Crexus observed, finding Elias slumped over a data terminal in the station's common area. The Dominion leader's scaled face betrayed what might have been concern, though his reptilian features were hard to read. Thanks, Elias said dryly. Just what I needed to hear. You're going to fail, Crexy said bluntly. The Conclave has ruled for centuries. One human's crusade won't change that. Then why are you here? Elias asked, meeting his gaze. Crexus's forked tongue flicked, tasting the air as if weighing his words. Have a daughter, Crexus said, his scaled hide shimmering with a rare vulnerability. She's brilliant, radiant, everything a Dominion heir should be. In 3 years, when she reaches maturity, our laws demand I offer her to the highest bidder to cement our alliances. Elias's head snapped up, his diplomat's instincts kicking in. You don't want to. What father would? Crexus's voice was a low growl, heavy with conflict. But tradition binds us. Our economy thrives on these genetic exchanges. To refuse is to court chaos. Or to invite change, Elias countered, his tone steady, but charged with possibility. Change, Crexus spat the word venomous on his forked tongue. Easy for humans to embrace. Your species is a fleeting spark in galactic history. For us who measure time in millennia, change is a terror. More terrifying than selling your daughter, Elias pressed, catching the shift in Crexus's scales, a ripple of deep emotion. Yes, Crexus admitted, his voice raw. Selling her preserves order. Refusing breeds uncertainty. And uncertainty in galactic politics can spark war. Elias finished reading the subtext. But what if it didn't? What if we could maintain genetic diversity and economic stability without auctions? Impossible, Crexus scoffed. The Verathorm thought survival without auctions was impossible, Elias said. They were wrong. The auctions aren't necessary anymore. They're just profitable for those in power, even if that's true. It is, Elias cut in, I can prove it. Crexus's ancient eyes narrowed, studying him. You truly believe you can dismantle a system that stood for 1,000 years? I believe everyone deserves a choice, Elias said, his voice burning with conviction. Your daughter, Queen Ceres. Every being reduced to their genetic code, they all deserve better. And if your idealism crashes against reality's wall, Crexus asked. Then at least I tried, Elias said. Can you say the same? Crexus loomed over him, his towering frame casting a shadow that promised violence. Then unexpectedly, he laughed, a grinding stone-like sound that echoed through the common area. You humans, so young, so foolish, so alive. He turned to leave, then paused. When you make your case to the Conclave, you might mention the Dominion's hypothetical interest in alternatives to the auction system. Hypothetically, Elias replied, a spark of hope igniting that could make a difference. It might, Crexus said, or it might add the Dominion to the list of civilizations you've doomed with your meddling. He slithered away, leaving Elias with a flicker of unexpected optimism. As the final hours ticked down, more allies emerged from the shadows. A Silveris philosopher, long critical of genetic commodification, offered quiet support. A Cryon engineer shared designs for voluntary breeding programs that didn't rely on coercion. Even lower caste Vayrith, emboldened by Theralis' defiance, whispered their doubts about the system. But for every ally, 10 opponents rose. The Morgath declared any disruption to the auctions an act of economic warfare. Minor species threatened to abandon the stellar conclave if their genetic investments were nullified. The pressure closed in like a collapsing star. Through it all, Ceres remained absent, cloistered in her quarters, refusing all visitors. The queen, who'd bared her vulnerability to Elias, now hid behind walls, physical and emotional, that worried him more than any political threat. With 6 hours left, Lyra burst into the archives, datapad in hand, her face etched with grim resolve. It's done, she said, thrusting the device at him. Everything's here: financial fraud, the suffering, the alternatives. She hesitated. But Elias, what earth cut you loose? Halverson convinced the review board you've gone rogue. If you present this and fail, it's not just your career. They'll brand you a terrorist acting against Earth's interests. They can't, Elias said, though his voice wavered. They can, and they did, Lyra replied, her eyes steady. You're on your own. Elias took the datapad, its weight like a gravestone. Everything he'd built, his career, his place in the galaxy, gone because he dared to call selling people wrong. You could walk away, Lyra said softly. Apologize, claim temporary insanity. Let the auction proceed. Earth might take you back. Eventually. Could you walk away knowing what we know? Elias asked. Lyra's lips quirked in a rueful smile. No, but I'm young and idealistic. You're supposed to be the seasoned diplomat. Maybe experience is overrated, he said, managing a weak grin. Besides, I've come this far. Might as well go for the spectacular failure everyone's betting on or the success no one sees coming. I like your version better, Lyra said, her voice warm with loyalty. A chime cut through the air, an incoming message. Elias activated his communicator, and Thyrelus's worried face appeared. The Queen the Keeper said without preamble, "She's in the memory garden. She accessed the forbidden memories an hour ago and hasn't moved since. I fear what she might do." Elias's blood ran cold. "I'm on my way." The memory garden, a sanctuary he had only heard whispers of, lay deep in the Varith section, a biodome where plants sang in frequencies just beyond human hearing, their melodies haunting the air. He found Ceres at its heart, bathed in the shifting glow of memory nodes. Her 6 eyes closed, her breathing so faint she seemed more statue than living being. The nodes around her pulsed with forbidden memories of Varith's lost glory and tragic fall. Ceres, Elias said softly, approaching with care. "Talk to me." They were happy. She whispered, eyes still shut, her voice raw with pain. "My ancestors, they were happy, and they threw it away for control. They chose fear. You can choose differently." Elias urged, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. Her eyes snapped open, their prismatic depths brimming with anguish that stole his breath. "I've seen what we could have been. Artists, poets, dreamers. Now look at me, a genetic factory cloaked in flesh, pretending to be a queen." "You're not pretending," Elias said, kneeling beside her, close but not touching. "You're more than that. What am I?" "Elias," she demanded, her voice breaking. "Beyond my DNA, my breeding potential. What am I?" "You're someone who laughs at my terrible jokes," he said softly. "Someone who shielded a stranger at great risk. Someone strong enough to question 1,000 years of tradition. You're Ceres, and that's enough." "Is it?" she whispered, shaking her head. "I know Queen Ceres, the genetic repository, the savior of my species. But just Ceres, she was never allowed to exist." "Then let her exist now," Elias said, his voice fierce with belief. "It's too late," she murmured. "The council." "Fuck the council," he interrupted, the human profanity shocking enough to widen her eyes. "Yeah, I said it. Fuck the council, the traditions, anyone who tells you who you have to be. Ceres is whoever you choose to be. That's the whole damn point, Choice." Her laugh was bitter, fragile. "Choice, such a human concept. You make it sound so simple." "It's simple," he said. "Not easy, but simple." She studied him, really seeing him for the first time since he'd arrived, her gaze piercing, yet vulnerable. "You found something in the archives." "A lot," Elias said. "Proof the auctions aren't necessary anymore, just profit for the powerful. Alternatives that could work better. Allies who want change but are too scared to speak. And you think data and logic will sway centuries of greed?" "No," he admitted. "I think you will. When they see you stand and say, 'I am not for sale,' when they see you choose your own path, that's what'll change everything." "Or destroy it," she said, her voice trembling. Maybe Elias conceded, but isn't destruction sometimes needed for rebirth? "Your history proves it." She rose, her fluid grace making his heart skip despite the stakes. "You're asking me to be a symbol. I'm asking you to be yourself," he corrected. "The symbol part's just a bonus. And if I'm not strong enough, you are," he said, his voice unwavering. "I've seen it. You just need to see it too." Her fingers brushed his face, their alien gentleness sending a shiver through him. "You barely know me, yet you have such faith. Someone's gotta," he said, grinning. "Might as well be the stupid human who doesn't know when to quit." Still hiding behind humor, she said, but a smile broke through, softening her features. "It's worked so far, has it?" she challenged. "You've lost your position, your government's support, maybe your future, all for someone you met 3 days ago." "Sounds pretty stupid when you put it like that," he admitted. "Beautifully stupid," she corrected, her voice warm. "The kind that changes worlds." A chime rang out, the final warning. In 1 hour, the conclave would convene. The auction would either proceed or be challenged. History hung in the balance. "I should prepare," Sarah said, but she didn't move, rooted by the weight of the moment. "We should prepare," Elias corrected. "We're in this together." She tasted the word it as if it were new and fragile. "Yes, I think I'd like that." As they left the memory garden, Elias felt the gravity of the coming confrontation. He had evidence allies' passion, but would it be enough? Would the conclave hear reason or cling to profitable tradition? More crucially, would Ceres find the strength to claim her personhood before a galaxy that saw her as property? 1 hour to find out. 1 hour to change everything or lose it all. No pressure. The stellar conclave chamber had transformed into a crucible of tension, no longer a stage for measured diplomacy, but a battleground of ideals. Representatives from 100 worlds filled every corner, some hovering, others coiled, a few shimmering in states of matter that defied human understanding. At the center, the auction platform loomed like an executioner's block, cold and unyielding. Elias adjusted his formal diplomatic attire one last time, the fabric feeling more like battle armor than cloth. Beside him, Sarah stood in her full royal regalia, but something had shifted. Her shoulders were squared, her 6 eyes blazing with a fire that hadn't been there 3 days ago. This wasn't the resigned queen of before. This was a woman who'd remembered her power went beyond her genes. Last chance to run, she murmured, her voice cutting through the cacophony of alien tongues. And missed the show. Never. Elias said, his attempt at humor falling flat as his hands trembled. Elias, she said, turning to him, the crowd fading for a moment. Whatever happens, know these 3 days were the first time I felt like a person, not a resource, not a symbol, but a person. That's worth any price. Before he could respond, the ceremonial chimes rang out sharp and commanding. The trial had begun. Administrator Terrell Vox took the central podium, his forearms spread in a gesture of ironclad authority. The contemplation period has ended. He declared, his voice a mechanical drumbeat. We gather to hear the human Elias Varn's alternative to our sacred traditions, or to proceed with the auction of Her Majesty Queen Ceres Vera genetic designation. I am not a designation. Ceres's voice sliced through the chamber like a plasma blade, sharp and unyielding. I am not a catalog number or a breeding chart. I am a sentient being, and I will be addressed as such. Shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly, a wave of disbelief crashing against Terrell's composure. His mandibles clicked in agitation. Your Majesty, the protocols? The protocols are what we're here to challenge, Elias interjected. Stepping forward, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. I thank the conclave for this chance to present a new vision. You have 30 minutes, Terrell said, his tone colder than a comet's core. Use them wisely. Elias activated his presentation system, the chamber's holoscreens blazing to life with data. But he didn't start with numbers. Instead, he displayed a child's drawing, crude yet unmistakable, a family. This was drawn by a fourth-caste Varith child. He began, his voice carrying a quiet power. When asked to depict her future, she drew a partner. She chose children. She wanted a life she dreamed of. Her teacher confiscated it, told her to draw something realistic, a breeding chart, a genetic matrix. He shifted the display, revealing thousands of similar drawings from the archives, each a silent cry for freedom. Every one of these is a dream, denied a choice, stolen not for survival, but for profit. The financial data followed, stark and damning, the flow of credits, the hidden accounts, the obscene wealth hoarded by those who upheld the system. The auction system generates 500 billion credits annually. Elias explained, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Less than 10% funds genetic research or species preservation. The rest lines the pockets of those who profit by treating people as products. Lies Counselor Virak Zal of the Varith elite surged to his feet, his aged frame trembling with fury. Fabrications meant to expose the truth, Elias interrupted, his voice like steel. Every piece of data comes from your own archives, Counselor. Or did you forget Keeper Theralis keeps records, even you thought buried? He brought up more evidence, economic models proving voluntary genetic exchanges were more efficient testimonies from species that thrived, without auctions, projections of a Varith reborn through choice, not control. Efficiency, the Morgath ambassador interjected, its compound eyes glinting with menace. But what of stability? The auction system has staved off wars, forged peace through shared investments. Would you cast that aside for your human idealism? Elias stood firm, his voice cutting through the chamber's tension. I'd cast it aside for something better, true. Peace built on mutual respect, not exploitation. Pretty words, Ambassador Crexus observed, his tone measured, his scaled hide catching the light like polished obsidian. But the galaxy doesn't run on poetry. What concrete alternative do you propose? This was the moment Elias had prepared for the fulcrum of his defiance. He activated a new holo display, unveiling a plan crafted with his unlikely allies, the Genetic Heritage Exchange. He declared, his voice ringing with conviction, a voluntary system where species share genetic material through mutual benefit and individual consent, no auctions, no coercion, no treating people as commodities. He outlined the framework: genetic banks for voluntary contributions, compensation tied to medical and scientific advancements, rather than breeding potential, and ironclad protections for individual autonomy while preserving species diversity. "This is chaos, Terrell," Vox bellowed, his mandibles snapping in outrage. "Without mandatory participation, without the auction's price mechanisms, how do we ensure genetic lines endure?" "You trust people to choose," Ceres said, stepping forward, her presence silencing the chamber like a star going nova. "You treat them as individuals, capable of shaping their own futures, not resources to be allocated." Easy words from one who's never faced extinction. Counselor Viraxol snarled, his aged form trembling with indignation. "Your Majesty, your duty." "My duty is to all my people," Ceres cut in, her voice a blade of resolve, not just the elite who profit from their pain. She strode to the platform's center, commanding every eye, every tentacle, every shimmering field in the room. "I've seen our history, all of it, including the memories you buried. We weren't always this way. We chose fear over freedom, control over connection. We can choose differently. And if we refuse," the Morgath ambassador's eyes glittered dangerously, "if the conclave votes to proceed with the auction despite your defiance, then I refuse to participate." Ceres declared, her words detonating in the silent chamber like a shockwave. "I am a sentient being with the right to self-determination. I will not be sold, traded, or bartered, not for tradition, not for profit, not even for the supposed good of my species." The chamber erupted, a cacophony of shouts in a dozen languages, some demanding order, others calling for Ceres's removal. Terrell pounded his ceremonial staff, the sound a futile plea for control. "You cannot refuse," Virac raged. "The law is clear." "Then the law is wrong," Elias said, stepping beside Ceres, his presence a quiet but unyielding shield. "Laws can change. We're proposing evolution growth, the radical idea that people matter more than profits." "The human has corrupted her," a voice shouted from the crowd. "This is what comes of letting lesser species into our councils." Lesser Lyra's voice rang out from the human delegation, sharp and fearless. Elias turned, surprised to see her flanked by a handful of Earth officials who'd defied Halverson's orders to stand with them. "Humans may be young, but we've learned selling people is wrong. How evolved are you if you haven't figured that out?" The chaos surged, but Elias noticed a shift. Not all the shouting was hostile. The Silveris delegation rippled in rapid discussion, their liquid forms shimmering with what he'd learned signaled deep thought. Minor species representatives nodded, their own histories of exploitation resonating with Ceres's stand. Even among the Vayrith cracks appeared whispers of doubt, questions long buried now finding voice. Enough Tarrell's amplified voice sliced through the din, restoring a fragile order. "The human's proposal is presented. By law, we vote all in favor of abandoning the auction system for this genetic heritage exchange." Hands, tentacles, and energy fields rose a trickle. At first, the Silveris, a few minor species, braved lower caste Vayrith. Then more joined. Crexus raised a scaled hand, lending the Dominion's weight. Others followed, some hesitant, others with palpable relief. But Elias's heart sank as he counted perhaps 40%, a remarkable feat for so radical a proposal, but a clear minority. "The motion fails," Terrell announced, his voice thick with satisfaction. "The auction will proceed." "No," Ceres's voice cut through quiet, yet carrying the weight of a collapsing star. She reached up, her fingers unfastening her crown, the ancient symbol of Vayrith royalty, its genetic locks bound to her bloodline. "What are you doing?" Varric demanded, his voice trembling with panic. "Something I should have done long ago," Ceres said. She held the crown aloft, its crystalline facets catching the chamber's light. "This represents 1,000 years of tradition, 1,000 years of treating our people as resources, to optimize, not individuals to cherish. Today, that tradition ends." She hurled the crown to the platform, the crash resounding like a thunderclap in the stunned silence. "I abdicate." The words struck like a physical blow, leaving even Elias, who thought he'd braced for anything, reeling. You You can't, Terrell stammered, his mandibles frozen. The bloodline, the genetic markers, without a queen. You'll find another way, Sarah said, her voice unshakable. I am no longer your queen. I am Saris, a person who refuses to be sold. She turned to the assembly, addressing them as equals, not subjects. For 1,000 years, we've lived in fear of extinction, of change, of choosing wrong. But fear isn't living. It's a slow death. This is madness, Varak hissed, his forearms trembling. Guards restrain her. She's been infected by some human contagion. Try it, Elias said, stepping between Saris and the advancing guards, knowing it was futile, but unable to stand idle. She's made her choice. Respect it. The human is right, a voice called out. Keeper Theralis emerging from the crowd of lower caste Vayrith. His presence a quiet act of defiance. The queen, former queen, has the right to abdicate. It's in our oldest laws, unused for millennia, but still binding. Then we'll crown another, Varak declared. Kavara has royal blood, diluted to less than 30%. Theralis countered, his voice steady. Insufficient for the genetic locks. Without Saris, there can be no recognized queen. The implications rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Without a queen, Vayrith's power structure, its genetic hierarchies, breeding programs, entire social order, would crumble, a 1,000-year foundation reduced to ash. You've doomed us, a voice whispered from the crowd. I've freed us, Saris corrected, her voice resonant with newfound strength. Now we can choose who we are, not what our genes dictate. A beautiful sentiment, the Morgath ambassador observed, its compound eyes unreadable. But sentiment doesn't prevent genetic collapse. Without auctions, without controlled breeding, your species faces the same bottleneck that nearly erased you. Then we'll face it as free people, Saris said. Better to die choosing our own path than live as slaves to tradition. There's another way, Elias found himself saying, the words spilling out before fully formed. The genetic heritage exchange doesn't need conclave approval. If individuals choose to participate voluntarily, if species form their own agreements outside the auction system, who's going to stop them? That's anarchy. Terrell spluttered, his composure fracturing. That's freedom, Lyra corrected, her young voice carrying a surprising weight. And it's already happening. While you've been arguing, I've been contacted by representatives from 17 worlds. They want to explore voluntary genetic exchanges. No auctions, no force, just people making choices. The Earth government hasn't authorized, someone began. The Earth government can stuff it, Lyra interrupted, drawing shocked gasps and a startled laugh from Elias. I'm not speaking as an Earth representative. I'm speaking as a person who believes others deserve dignity. This is revolution, Varak accused, his voice venomous. Yes, Saris agreed, her simplicity cutting through the noise. It is. The chamber exploded again, but the energy had shifted. Amid the anger and fear, hope flickered. Silent delegates spoke up, voicing doubts about the system. Species coerced into auctions expressed relief at an alternative. You've broken everything, Terrell said to Elias, his voice a mix of awe and horror. A millennium-old system shattered in 3 days by one human's stubbornness. Not just mine, Elias corrected, glancing at Saris. It took someone brave enough to say no, someone strong enough to choose freedom over security. And now what Crexis asked, his practical nature cutting through the chaos. Without the auction system, without the queen, how does Vayrith function? We learn, Saris said, her voice steady. We make mistakes. We grow, we become something new. Not because our genes demand it, but because we choose it. The conclave won't recognize. Varric began. The conclave will adapt or become irrelevant. Crexis interrupted, his scales shifting with resolve. The galaxy is changing. Counselor, the question is whether we change with it or get left behind. The debate raged on for hours, but the outcome was sealed not by votes or laws, but by one person's refusal, and others realizing they could refuse too. By the session's end, the auction system was dead, not by vote, but by abandonment. No one was willing to participate. As delegates filed out, many paused to speak with Elias and Saris, some offering support, others warnings, a few quiet thanks. The Morgath ambassador lingered longest, its compound eyes inscrutable. You've created chaos, it said. The economic fallout will take decades to unravel. Elias sensed an unspoken shift, but the ambassador admitted perhaps chaos was overdue. We've grown too comfortable with our cruelties. It left without another word. Finally, only Elias Saris Lyra and Theralis remained the chamber, now a hollow echo of its former grandeur, brimming with possibility and uncertainty. "What have we done?" Saris asked softly, her voice tinged with wonder and fear. "Changed the world," Lyra said, grinning. "Maybe tanked our careers, but definitely made history. I meant what I said." Saris continued, her eyes distant. "I'm not a queen anymore. I'm just me. And I don't even know who that is." "That's the point," Elias said, his voice warm with conviction. "Now you get to find out. No expectations, no scripted paths, just choices. Will you help me learn to be just a person?" Her question hung heavy, laden with meaning beyond its words. Elias felt its weight, not duty but possibility. "If you'll help me figure out what's next," he replied. "I just talked my way out of a career and probably pissed off half the galaxy. I could use a guide." The blind leading the blind, Theralis observed a trace of fondness in his voice. "How very human. How very alive," Saris corrected, her eyes meeting Elias's as they left the chamber. He thought of the child's drawing he'd shown, a simple vision of a chosen future once impossible. Now walking beside a former queen who'd chosen freedom over power, with an intern who'd picked principle over ambition in a galaxy brimming with new horizons, it didn't seem impossible at all. The future was uncertain. Challenges, setbacks, likely failures loomed. The old system would fight to survive, and the new one would take time to build. But for the first time in a millennium, the people of Vaerith and countless other worlds had what they'd been denied: choice. And that, Elias thought as Saris's hand brushed his, a gesture unthinkable 3 days ago, was worth any price. So Lyra said as they walked through corridors that seemed brighter, alive with potential. "What's the plan now?" Elias looked at his unlikely companions. Unlikely companions, a former queen learning to embrace her humanity, a keeper who'd risked all for truth, an intern with more courage than seasoned ambassadors. "Now we build something better," Elias said, his voice steady with purpose. "No pressure," Ceres teased, her use of his catchphrase sparking a warmth in his chest. That she could find humor amid such monumental upheaval told him everything they could do this. It would be grueling, messy, likely littered with more near-death experiences than he'd care to count. But together they could forge a new path. The news of her abdication spread through the station like a supernova, igniting headlines across the galaxy within hours. "Vaerith Queen abdicates, ancient auction system in chaos," screamed feeds in 100 tongues. Elias watched from his quarters as pundits dissected the upheaval. Politicians postured, and ordinary beings began to realize if a queen could defy a millennium-old tradition, perhaps they could too. "They'll come for us," Ceres said, her voice low but resolute. She'd shed her royal regalia for simple garments that somehow made her more majestic than any crown, a testament to her newfound freedom. The council, the traditionalists, everyone who profited from the old system, they won't let this stand. Elias turned from the flickering news feeds, meeting her gaze. "I know." "Are you ready for that?" "No," she admitted, her 6 eyes glinting with vulnerability. "But I'm ready to try. That's new for me, being allowed to be unready, uncertain. It's terrifying and wonderful." She moved to stand beside him, her towering frame gazing out at the starfield's endless expanse. "Do you know what I want to do first, as just Ceres, not a queen?" "What?" "See a sunset," she said softly. "A real one on a planet without calculating its genetic optimization potential. Just to find it beautiful because it is." "I know just the place," Elias said, a grin breaking through. "Earth has sunsets that'll steal your breath. I could show you if you'd like. I'd like that very much," she replied, her voice warm with a quiet longing. A chime interrupted and Lyra's face appeared on the comm screen, exhausted but beaming. "Good news and bad news," she announced. "Bad news, Earth's branded you persona non grata, Elias. Halverson's apoplectic. You're banned from all diplomatic posts, maybe even the planet itself. Good news. 17 worlds have withdrawn from the auction system backing voluntary exchanges. The Silveras are calling you a hero of individual rights. Oh, and 3 diplomatic corps offered me jobs. They seem to value courage over protocol." "You're not taking them," Elias said, half joking. "Are you kidding?" Lyra laughed. "Miss, the next insane thing you pull." "Not a chance," her expression sobered. "But seriously, what's next? The old system's crumbling, but we need something to replace it. First, we survive the next few days, Elias said. Then we build one choice at a time. After Lyra signed off, Elias and Ceres sat in a comfortable silence, the weight of their actions balanced by the lightness of possibility. Thank you, Ceres said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. For what? For seeing me not the queen, not the genetic repository, not a symbol, just me. Her smile was unguarded, transforming her alien features into something breathtakingly honest. We make a damn good team. The best, Elias agreed, grinning. A washed-up diplomat and a former queen taking on the galaxy. When you put it like that, we don't stand a chance, she teased. Or we stand every chance, he countered. Depends on your perspective. I'm choosing optimism. Ceres decided, her eyes sparkling. It's worked for you so far. Stubborn optimism against impossible odds, that's humanity's thing. Then maybe I'll learn to be a little human, she said. And I'll learn to be a little Vayrith, cultural exchange at its finest. They talked through the night, weaving plans and dreams in equal measure. By the station's artificial dawn, they'd sketched the framework for the Liberty Concord, an alliance dedicated to safeguarding autonomy across species. It was ambitious, likely impossible, and undeniably dangerous, but it was perfect. As the false light broke, Elias watched Ceres navigate her first morning as a free woman, marveling at simple choices, what to eat, what to wear, where to go. It struck him that freedom wasn't just an idea, it was a practice, a daily act most took for granted. Ready to change the galaxy, he asked as they braced for what lay ahead. No, she said, taking his hand, her touch both alien and grounding. But I'm ready to try. And that in the end was enough, two souls standing against tradition and tyranny, proving the most powerful revolutions began with a single word, no. The future loomed uncertain and daunting, yet brimming with potential. Whatever came, success, failure, triumph, or tragedy, they'd face it as themselves, unbound by birth or duty. They'd face it free, and that made all the difference. The attack came on the third day after the abdication, shattering the fragile calm Elias had dared to hope for. He was in their makeshift office in the station's neutral zone, poring over Liberty Concord proposals when the lights flickered and died. Emergency power activated the station's AI, intoned its calm voice, maddening against the chaos. Security breach in sections 7 through 12. Ceres burst through the door, her forearms already in defensive stances he'd seen her practice but never wield. Morgath's strike team, she said, her voice taut. They're coming for us. How many? Elias asked, his heart racing. Enough. She grabbed him, her strength lifting his human frame with ease. We need to move now. They ran through corridors that felt too narrow, too exposed, the emergency lighting casting everything in a hellish red glow, transforming familiar spaces into a nightmarish labyrinth. Behind them, the chittering of Morgath combat suits echoed, amplified by metal, like a swarm of furious insects. This way, Lyra's voice crackled through their communicators. Maintenance shaft level 3. I've got a ship waiting. Since when do you have a ship? Elias gasped as they sprinted. Since I figured someone would try to kill us eventually, Lyra shot back. I'm an optimist, not an idiot. They dove into the maintenance shaft just as pulse fire erupted, the energy beams searing the air, where they'd stood, leaving the walls glowing cherry red. Elias's diplomatic training hadn't covered combat, but he knew those weren't warning shots. The Conclave denounced you yesterday, Ceres explained, as they crawled through the cramped space, her voice steady despite the danger. They've branded you a terrorist and me a genetic deviant. There's a bounty. How much am I worth? Elias quipped, unable to resist. This isn't funny, Ceres snapped, pausing to glance back. Her 6 eyes filled with fear, not for herself but for him. It's a little funny, he said, forcing a grin. Minor diplomat to galactic terrorist in a week, that's gotta be a record. They'll kill you, she said, her voice breaking. They'll try, he replied, his defiance unshaken. They emerged in a docking bay where Lyra waited beside a ship that looked like it had been stitched together from a dozen wrecks, its patchwork hull barely holding. But its engines hummed, ready for flight. Where's Theralis? Elias asked as they boarded. Safe house in the lower districts. Lyra said, her fingers dancing over the pilot controls. The keepers are protecting him. He's not the only one questioning the system. The ship lurched as Lyra triggered an emergency launch, bypassing protocols. Through the viewport, Elias saw Morgath soldiers flooding the bay, their weapons tracking the ascending craft. Hold on, Lyra warned, then threw the ship into a dizzying spin that defied physics. The inertial dampeners groaned, but they cleared the station's defensive perimeter before its weapons could lock on. "Where are we going?" Elias asked, his stomach still reeling. Sanctuary Ceres said, "A world beyond Conclave jurisdiction. Refugees from the auction system have gathered there for decades. If we reach it, we'll have time to plan." "Coordinates locked," Lyra added. "It's a 3-day trip through some sketchy space lanes, but I've flown worse." When Elias asked, incredulous, "You don't want to know?" As the station shrank behind them, Elias felt the weight of what they'd lost: the platform for change, the momentum the Allies scattered by violence and politics. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" Ceres asked, her voice soft. "For dragging you into this. If I'd kept my mouth shut, you'd still be queen safe." Caged, she corrected her hand, brushing his face, the gesture now familiar. "Grounding. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this even if it gets us killed. Especially then. Better to die free than live as property." "When did you get so philosophical?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "When a stubborn human showed me it was possible," she replied, her eyes warm. They spent the first day of the journey in tense silence, each grappling with their thoughts. Elias replayed the past week, searching for moments he could have played differently, been more diplomatic, less reckless, sought compromise instead of revolution. But no compromise would have meant accepting that some could be property, just under better terms. That wasn't compromise, it was complicity. "You're brooding," Ceres observed, finding him in the ship's small observation lounge, where stars glittered like diamond dust on black velvet, thinking he corrected, but her knowing look called his bluff. "Brooding, I've learned the difference." She settled beside him, her towering frame dwarfing the human-designed furniture, making it seem almost comically small. "What's eating you?" "Everything," he admitted. "We started something we couldn't finish. People believed in us, and we had to run. We started something unstoppable," she countered, her voice firm. "Ideas don't die when their speakers flee. They spread. They evolve." "You sound like you believe that." "I have to," she said, her eyes fixed on the stars. "The alternative is thinking the last week meant nothing, and I refuse that." She paused, then softer. "Do you know what I thought about during those breeding negotiations when they discussed my genes like I was some exotic plant?" Elias shook his head. "I imagined being someone else, a merchant, a pilot, a teacher, someone whose choices mattered only to them." Her laugh was soft, bittersweet. "I never thought I'd get the chance." And now he asked, "Now I'm terrified," she admitted, her hands gesturing helplessly. "Every choice is mine, so every consequence is too. As queen, I could blame tradition duty. Now I'm just Ceres, making it up as I go." "Welcome to how the rest of us live," Elias said, offering a wry smile. "How do you stand it?" "Practice. Lots of mistakes. I don't know how to make mistakes," she said. "I was never allowed." He turned to face her fully, his voice earnest. "Then, let me teach you. First lesson, mistakes aren't failures. They're how we learn. What if they hurt people? Then we learn faster." Her 6 eyes studied him, their prismatic depths unreadable yet warm. "You're either very wise or very foolish." "Third option," he said, grinning. "I'm making it up too, just with more practice." Her laugh filled the lounge, a sound like starlight breaking through clouds. "Maybe that's wisdom, admitting ignorance and moving forward anyway." "If so, I'm the wisest damn man alive," Elias said, earning another laugh. An alarm shattered the moment, Lyra's voice echoing through the ship. "We've got company, 2 Conclave interceptors coming in hot." Elias and Ceres raced to the bridge, where Lyra was already pushing their patchwork ship through evasive maneuvers that tested its limits. "How'd they find us?" Elias asked, gripping a console as the ship lurched. "Tracking beacon," Lyra said tersely. "Someone planted it before we left." "Can you lose them in this bucket?" "Not a chance," she said, yanking the controls to dodge a spread of plasma fire. "But I can keep us alive long enough to reach the scatter." The scatter, Ceres's voice carried both recognition and dread. "Asteroid field," Lyra explained. "Dense enough to hide and unstable enough that only an idiot would follow." "Or a desperate fugitive," Elias added, his voice tinged with grim humor. "Exactly," Lyra shot back, her focus unbroken. The next hour stretched into the longest of Elias's life. Lyra piloted like a warrior forged in combat zones, coaxing their salvaged ship through maneuvers that should have torn its patchwork hull apart. The Conclave interceptors dogged them relentlessly, their superior tech closing the gap with predatory precision. There, Lyra breathed as a field of tumbling asteroids loomed ahead, a chaotic ballet of stone and gravity. Hold on. She dove into the scatter without hesitation, plunging them into a maelstrom of rock and momentum. Asteroids from pebbles to mountain-sized behemoths spun in a deadly dance. Lyra wove between them with desperate finesse, using larger rocks as shields against the interceptor's plasma fire. One pursuer dared to follow, emphasis on dared. Elias watched through the rear viewport as it grazed a spinning asteroid, its shields flaring before collapsing in a brilliant burst. The ship spiraled into the maze, lost to the void. The second interceptor was cagier, lurking at the field's edge, firing calculated shots whenever they broke cover. I can't keep this up, Lyra warned, sweat beading on her forehead, her hands trembling from relentless adjustments. This ship's falling apart. Let me, Sari said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. I know this field. I studied it years ago when I dreamed. She shook her head, dismissing the memory. It doesn't matter. I know its patterns. Let me guide you. What followed was a dance of trust, delicate as a tightrope over an abyss. Saris called out directions with unyielding certainty, her voice steady as a beacon. Lyra followed without question, steering deeper into the field where asteroids moved in patterns that seemed chaotic, but pulsed with hidden rhythms. Now Saris commanded full stop, cut the engines. Are you insane? Lyra asked, but obeyed her trust absolute. The ship hung motionless as a massive asteroid passed within meters, its gravity snaring them in its wake. To their pursuer, they had vanished, another piece of debris in the cosmic churn. They waited in tense silence for an hour, hearts pounding until Saris deemed it safe to move. The interceptor had retreated, unwilling to brave the field's depths. How'd you know? Elias asked as they cleared the scatter's far edge, his voice thick with awe. Saris's eyes softened, carrying an old buried pain. When I was young, before the genetic test confirmed my royal markers, I dreamed of being a pilot. I studied every treacherous route in known space, imagining myself flying them. Her voice faltered. When the test came back positive, those dreams died. But I never forgot. You'd have been one hell of a pilot, Lyra said, her voice warm with admiration. That was incredible. Thank you, Saris said, startled by the praise. No one's ever complimented me on anything but my genetics. Get used to it, Elias said, grinning. You're full of surprises. I'm beginning to see that, she replied, a faint smile breaking through. 2 days later, they reached Aloria, limping on battered engines, held together by sheer will and emergency patches. Elias had braced for a desolate refugee camp, but Aloria defied expectations, a vibrant colony carved into a vast canyon's walls. Buildings blended the architectural styles of a dozen species, their edges softened by gardens and parks that tamed the harsh landscape. It was chaotic, yet pulsing with life. Welcome to Aloria, their greeter said, a human woman whose scars spoke of battles hard won. I'm Director Saria Ken. We've been expecting you. Elias blinked, surprised to meet another human so far from Earth. Exiled 12 years ago for refusing to betray refugee locations to the Conclave? Saria explained. I've been helping run this place ever since. Come people are eager to meet you. What followed was a revelation. Aloria wasn't just a hideout. It was a thriving society built on the principles Elias had championed. Species mingled freely, choosing partners and paths based on desire, not genetic mandates. Children darted through the streets, their diversity a testament to freedom. This is what we were fighting for, Elias said, his voice thick with wonder. This is what you inspired us to expand, Saria corrected. We've existed in secret for decades, but your stand at the Conclave gave people hope. Refugees arrived daily, not just from Vayrith, but from dozens of worlds tired of being commodities. They were housed in a building that blended alien elegance with welcoming warmth, its rooms adapting to multiple species' needs. As Elias settled into his quarters, exhaustion hitting like a gravity well, he found Saris at his window gazing at the colony. It's beautiful, she said softly, her voice trembling. It's free, Elias corrected, stepping beside her. Same thing. Tears, silvery Vayrith tears, traced patterns down her face. They did it. They built what we only dreamed of. They built it because someone dreamed it first, Elias said. Now we get to help it grow. Saris's voice held uncertainty. You could go back, make peace with Earth, reclaim your old life. What old life, Elias said, shaking his head. The one where I ignored injustice and played political games while people suffered. That life ended the moment I stood up in that auction hall. This is my life now, exile, meaning purpose. He hesitated, then added, with you if you'll have me. She went still, her 6 eyes searching his. Elias, different species, different everything. It's impossible, impractical, probably illegal in half the galaxy. Before he could respond, she silenced him with a kiss. It was awkward, their anatomies clashing, his human lips, fumbling against her Vayrith features, her multi-jointed fingers uncertain in their touch. Yet it was raw, honest, a collision of 2 worlds finding harmony and imperfection. Her lips cool and opalescent, pressed against his with a tenderness that spoke of choice, not obligation. Her breath, a soft rhythm that grounded him in the moment. Yes, she said as they parted, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. To all of it, the impossible, the impractical, the illegal. Yes, even though I'm just a failed diplomat with a knack for starting revolutions. Especially because of that, she said, 2 hands cupping his face while the others drew him close. Her embrace a shield against the galaxy's chaos. You taught me to choose. I choose you. Lyra's voice broke the moment calling through the door. Hey, lovebirds, sorry to interrupt, but we've got incoming messages you need to see. They found her in Aloria's communication center screens blazing with transmissions from across the galaxy. The images stole Elias's breath, protests on Vayrith Prime, thousands demanding reform. The Silvaris Parliament voting to end forced genetic exchanges. 3 more worlds declaring independence from the Conclave's breeding programs. Everywhere signs read, I am not property. You did this, Lyra said, grinning. You 2 idiots who wouldn't shut up about choice and dignity, you started a revolution. We lit a match, Elias corrected. They turned it into a fire. Speaking of fire, Sarya Ken said, entering with a data pad, her expression grim but determined. The Conclave's in panic mode. They're offering amnesty to anyone who returns to the old system within 30 days. How many are taking it? Saris asked. None so far, Sarya said. Freedom's addictive and dangerous, Elias added. They won't give up easily. No, Sarya agreed, which is why we need to be ready. Aloria can't stay hidden forever, not with refugees flooding in. We need to go public, establish ourselves as a legitimate alternative to the Conclave's authority. That's, Elias began, insane, suicidal, necessary. Sarya finished, her smile sharp. All of the above. Revolution isn't just defiant moments. It's the hard work of building something better. I'm in, Lyra said instantly. I didn't steal a ship and fly through an asteroid field to hide, as am I. Saris added, her voice resolute. I've been a symbol my whole life. Now I'll be a symbol for something I choose. They turned to Elias, who laughed at the absurdity. A week ago he'd been a nobody. Now he was helping lead an interstellar revolution from a hidden canyon on a forgotten world. Why not, he said. I've already lost my job, my citizenship, and nearly my life. Might as well go all in. That's the spirit, Surya said. Now let's talk strategy. The Conclave's wounded, not broken. They'll try to crush us before we gain legitimacy. We need allies, resources, and a vision people can rally behind. We have that, Ceres said with quiet certainty. A galaxy where every being chooses their path, where genetics don't dictate destiny, where love outweighs breeding contracts. A vision worth fighting for, Sarya said. Worth dying for, worth living for. Elias corrected. That's the point, not just surviving, but living. They planned through the night, strategies taking shape. Messages went out to sympathetic worlds, calling for an alliance rooted in individual rights, not genetic commerce. Resources were allocated, defenses planned, hope kindled and carefully nurtured. As dawn broke over Aloria, a true dawn painting the canyon in gold and crimson, Elias stood with Saris on a balcony overlooking the colony. No regrets, she asked. None, he said. You only that it took so long to find the courage to say no. She leaned against him, her weight a comforting anchor. Do we have a shot at succeeding? Honestly, I don't know, Elias admitted. The Conclave has resources, tradition, fear. But we've got something they don't, people who've tasted freedom and won't let go. We've got the truth beings aren't property, and we've got the galaxy's most powerful force, stubbornness. He grinned. Pure, idiotic human stubbornness that says impossible just means it hasn't been done yet. Her laugh rang out, carrying across the waking colony. Then we'll spread this human contagion further. Working on it, he said. I've already got you making bad jokes and worse life choices. A few more weeks and you'll be fully corrupted. Promises, promises, she teased. They stood together as Eloria stirred species, mingling frilly children playing without genetic mandates. A dream was becoming reality, one choice at a time. The revolution had begun not with armies or weapons, but with two people saying no to a system that forgot individuals mattered. It would continue the same way, one soul at a time, choosing freedom over security, dignity over tradition, love over law. The Grand Tribunal's architecture loomed with deliberate menace, its towering spires and cold crystalline walls designed to shrink the accused to insignificance. It might have worked had Elias Varn not spent 3 months forging a movement that made their grandeur feel hollow like a fading star's light. Elias Varn, administrator, Terrell Vox intoned from his elevated podium, his forearms rigid with authority. You stand accused of sedition, terrorism, genetic contamination, and the destruction of millennia-old traditions. How do you plead? Elias's voice rang clear, defiant through the chamber. Guilty of believing people aren't property. If that's terrorism, your definitions need work. Angry murmurs rippled through the assembly, a tide of dissent. Terrell's mandibles clicked in agitation. You mock these proceedings. I mock the idea that fighting for others' freedom is a crime, Elias shot back, unyielding. You've destabilized dozens of worlds, Terrell accused. The economic chaos alone made some rich bastards slightly less rich. Elias interrupted, his voice sharp as a plasma blade. Meanwhile, millions are discovering they can choose their own lives. Forgive me if I don't cry over your portfolios. The prosecutor, a cryon whose crystalline form pulsed with indignation, stepped forward, their facets gleaming with outrage. The accused shows no remorse. He corrupted Queen Ceres Vera, convincing her to abandon her sacred duty. I convinced her she's a person, not a product, Elias said, his words steady, despite the weight of the chamber's gaze. The fact you call that corruption says everything about your system. Where is she, Counselor Verak? Zul demanded from the Varith delegation, his aged voice trembling with fury. Your accomplice in this madness. Safe, Elias said simply, his tone laced with quiet defiance. Free. Happy. Everything you never allowed her to be. It was a lie or half a lie. Ceres was closer than they knew, but Elias would face death before betraying her. Their plan, born from desperation and audacity in equal measure, hinged on the conclave believing she'd abandon him. The former queen will be found, Varak vowed, his forearms trembling. And when she is, what forced her back into your breeding program that worked so well last time? Elias taunted, his voice dripping with scorn. Enough, Terrell commanded his staff, slamming the podium. The evidence is presented. The accused's words confirm his guilt. Does anyone speak for the defendant? Silence fell heavy as a neutron star. Elias hadn't expected support backing him was political suicide. Then a voice broke the quiet. I speak for him. Ambassador Crexus of the Dominion rose, his scaled hide, reflecting the chamber's lights like polished obsidian. Not because I endorse his methods, but because he forced us to face an uncomfortable truth. Our prosperity was built on commodifying those we deemed genetically valuable. It's time we confront that. The Dominion has lost its reason, a voice shouted. Or found it. Crexus countered, his voice a low growl. My daughter stands with the Liberty Concord now, not coerced, but by choice. And I find I'm proud of her for it. Other voices rose, tentative but growing. A Silveris philosopher spoke of ethics, their liquid form rippling with conviction. A minor world's representative shared their own pain under forced breeding contracts. Each testimony chipped at the conclave's monolithic certainty, but it wasn't enough. The vote came, and conviction carried overwhelmingly. Death by genetic dissolution, Terrell announced with grim satisfaction, a method to unravel the condemned's DNA, slowly harvesting useful genetic material while ensuring maximum pain. The sentence will be carried out at dawn. As guards moved to escort him to the detention center, Elias caught a flicker of movement in the observation gallery, a figure in maintenance coveralls moving with a grace he'd recognize anywhere. He suppressed a smile. The real show was about to begin. The detention center was a marvel of security calibrated for every physiology. Elias's cell matched human gravity and air, its light spectrum tuned to keep him docile. But it wasn't built for hope. Quite the performance, a voice said from the shadows. Keeper Thoralis emerged, phasing through what should have been a solid wall, a Varith ability finally revealed. You played your part perfectly. Did the others make it out? Elias asked, his voice low. All safe, Thoralis said. The Conclave was so focused on you, they missed the real operation. He handed Elias a small device. From Saris, she said you'd know when to use it. Elias pocketed it, its weight a promise. How many 17 worlds have formally withdrawn from the Conclave's authority? Thoralis said. 30 more are debating it. The liberty conquered is no longer a dream. It's real thanks to you and her. Thanks to everyone who stood up, Elias corrected. We just gave them permission. Thoralis's four eyes studied him, a hint of fondness in their depths. You changed everything. Tomorrow will handle itself, Elias said, cutting him off. How's the setup? Complete. Every major newsfeed in the galaxy will carry the signal. Whatever happens in that execution chamber, trillions will see it. No pressure, Elias quipped. Thoralis almost smiled, still joking in the face of death. It's that or scream, Elias said. Screaming's less productive. The keeper phased back through the wall, leaving Elias alone with the weight of what was coming. He'd known capture was a possibility when he agreed to be the bait in a trap that could either free millions or end in his agonizing public death. He thought of Saris likely pacing in her safe house. She'd wanted to face the Conclave herself, but they'd agreed he was expendable in a way she wasn't. A failed human diplomat was a symbol. A free Varith queen was hope incarnate. I trust you, she'd said, before he left for the mission that led to his capture, her four arms holding him as if sheer will could keep him safe. But I hate this plan. It's a terrible plan. He'd agreed, his voice soft. But it's our terrible plan. Her kiss had been fierce, desperate. Her lips cool and opalescent against his, her multi-jointed fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him close as if to imprint him in her soul. Come back to me, she'd whispered. Always. Now in a cell built by beings who saw him as little more than an animal, Elias clung to that promise. Dawn came too fast. The guards were professional, almost gentle. No need to damage the condemned before the spectacle. They led him through corridors packed with witnesses, conclave members, media dignitaries from worlds still loyal to the old system. The execution chamber was an amphitheater. Every seat filled its air thick with anticipation. At its center stood the genetic dissolver, a machine of terrible beauty, its crystalline chambers gleaming like art designed to unravel him, molecule by molecule, while cataloging his DNA. Last words, Terrell asked, gesturing to the device. A few, Elias said, stepping to the chamber's center, the lights locking onto him, broadcasting to the galaxy. It was the performance of his life, literally. You think you're punishing me, he began, his voice steady despite the fear clawing his chest. You're proving my point. You're so terrified of people choosing their own paths that you'll torture someone for suggesting it. What does that say about your system? It says we protect order, Terrell replied, his voice cold. Tradition, stability. It says you're scared shitless, Elias shot back. Scared that if people have choices, they won't choose you. And you're right to be. On 17 worlds, people are already building lives based on desire, not DNA. Children are born to parents who chose each other, not genetic matches rigged for profit. Art is being created, songs sung, love made, all without your permission. And it's beautiful. Enough, Verax snarled. Activate the dissolver. One more thing, Elias said, pulling out the device Thyralis had given him. A message from someone who wanted to be here, but had better things to do. He pressed the activation key. Instantly, every screen in the chamber, every feed across the galaxy lit up with Saris's image, but not as they'd known her. She stood in a medical facility, surrounded by doctors and scientists from a dozen species, her form radiant and unmistakably pregnant. My name is Saris Vegra, her recorded voice declared, clear and unyielding. Former Queen of Varith, now a free person. 3 months ago, I chose a partner, not for genetic compatibility or political gain, but for love. The father is human incompatible by every measure your science claims. Yet here I am carrying a child that shouldn't exist. Gasps echoed through the chamber. On the screen, Saris continued. We uncovered a truth the Conclave hides. The genetic barriers between species are artificial. engineered by the very technologies that claim to optimize breeding. When we removed those blocks, when we chose love over control, life found a way. She stepped aside, revealing dozens of mixed-species couples, Varith with humans, Silvaris with Creon, all bearing signs of successful pregnancies, combinations the auction system deemed impossible. This is what they fear, Sarah said. Not genetic collapse, but genetic freedom. The power to choose who we love, how we live, who we become. They'll kill Elias Varn today for showing us we have options. But ideas can't be executed. Choices can't be dissolved. And love, it's the most powerful force in any galaxy. The recording ended, but its shockwave lingered, the chamber erupting in chaos, some crying fraud, others demanding investigations. Elias stood calmly by the dissolver, waiting, his heart pounding, but his resolve unbroken. Lies, Terrell declared. Genetic manipulation. Propaganda, test me. Elias interrupted, his voice cutting through the din. I carry the same markers. Test me now publicly and see if I'm lying. It was a gamble. The treatments Saris underwent were experimental. The genetic blocks only half understood. But if it worked, Terrell hesitated, caught in a trap, refusing would scream fear. Accepting might prove Elias right. Freedom looks like, Elias declared into the stunned silence, his voice a beacon in the chaos. Not anarchy, but choice. Not collapse, but evolution. We don't need your auctions because we don't need your artificial barriers. Love finds a way when you let it. The sentence stands, Varexol bellowed, but his voice faltered, lacking the conviction of moments before. Activate the dissolver. No, a voice rang from the gallery. Ambassador Krex's stood as scales shimmering through hues of resolute determination. I call for a stay of execution pending a full investigation of these claims. Seconded, a Silvaris delegate added their liquid form, rippling with conviction. Thirded, another voice called, then another, a chorus of defiance rising. Terrell Vox pounded his ceremonial staff, the sound swallowed by the chamber's unrest. The conviction was legal based on laws that may be built on lies. Krexes interrupted, his voice a low growl. If the genetic barriers are artificial, the auction system isn't just immoral, it's unnecessary. We demand the truth. The truth, Elias said, seizing the moment, is that you've been selling people to cling to control, not to save your species. The truth is that love is stronger than Perma. Before he could finish, the lights cut out, plunging the chamber into darkness. Emergency systems flared a second later, bathing everything in a hellish red glow. In that fleeting blackout, Elias felt four hands. Saris's hands grip him, pulling him with urgent strength. Now would be good, she whispered in his ear, her voice a lifeline. He triggered the second function on the device Theralis had given him, a localized EMP, burst subtle enough to evade detection, but powerful enough to disable his energy shackles. They fell from his wrists with a soft clank as Saris tugged him toward a maintenance exit that shouldn't have been accessible. I told you to stay hidden, Elias gasped as they ran, the alarms blaring behind them. I told you I choose you, she replied, her voice fierce with resolve. That means being here when you need me. The chamber dissolved into pandemonium, some delegates shouting for order, others demanding answers about the genetic revelations. In the chaos, two figures in maintenance coveralls slipped unnoticed through the fray. Lyra's waiting with transport, Ceres said as they navigated the service corridors, their steps quick and silent. The conclave's got bigger problems than us now. The genetic evidence triggered automatic investigations on 15 worlds. They can't bury this. She paused, her hand brushing his cheek in a fleeting, fervent kiss, her lips cool yet burning with defiance. The baby's fine, growing perfectly despite being impossible. We make beautiful impossibilities together. They reached the service dock, where Lyra waited beside another borrowed ship, its engines already humming with life. About time, she said, her fingers flying over the controls. Half the galaxy's watching the conclave tear itself apart. The other half's proposing to whoever they actually love, not who their genes dictate. As they lifted off, Elias glanced back at the tribunal complex, its spires fading into the void. Think it worked? Look, Sarah said, activating the ship's news feeds. Every channel blazed with the same images, protests erupting across worlds, celebrations of newfound freedom, demands for truth. On a dozen planets, people flocked to medical centers, uncovering artificial genetic blocks. Auction houses stood empty, while clinics overflowed with couples seeking Eloria's treatments. It worked, Lyra confirmed, her voice triumphant. The old system died on live broadcast. The question is, what's next? Whatever we choose, Elias said, taking Saris's hand, its multi-jointed strength grounding him. That's the point, we get to choose. The flight back to Eloria took 2 days threading through hidden routes and shadow lanes. By the time they landed, the colony had tripled in size, its canyon teeming with ships, refugee vessels, freighters, passenger liners, all seeking sanctuary. What had been a hidden refuge was now a beacon pulsing with life. Saria Ken met them at the landing pad, her scarred face split by a grin wider than Elias had ever seen. Congratulations, you've officially broken the galaxy. We had help, Elias said, gesturing to his companions. You had each other, Saria corrected. That recording, Sarah's brilliant. Nothing shatters fear like proof there's another way. How bad's the backlash? Saris asked, her voice steady but cautious. Bad in some places, Saria admitted. The old guard's fighting hard. But more worlds join the Liberty Concord every hour. The Dominions recognize Eloria as a sovereign state, others are following. Her expression turned serious, which means we need to organize fast. A symbol's powerful, but it needs structure to endure. The next weeks blurred into a whirlwind of action. Elias threw himself into drafting the Charter of Free Choice, a document enshrining rights that transcended species and genetics. Saris worked with medical teams overseeing the spread of treatments that dismantled artificial genetic barriers. Lyra somehow became Eloria's de facto defense coordinator, transforming a ragtag fleet of refugee ships into a protective force. I never meant to start a government, Elias confessed one night, exhausted after another 18-hour day of negotiations. You didn't, Saris said, her hand resting on her growing belly, a quiet smile softening her features. You started a conversation. We're finishing it together. Still going from failed diplomat to revolutionary leaders? A hell of a leap, he said. From queen to free woman was bigger, she countered. At least you had practice making choices. How's Junior? Elias asked, placing his hand over hers, feeling the faint stir of life within. Active, she said, her smile widening. The doctors say she's developing perfectly a true hybrid of human intuition, Varith intellect, and probably both our stubborn streaks. She scans confirmed it yesterday, Saris said, her eyes glowing with pride. The first of many impossibilities. A chime interrupted, and Theralis' urgent face appeared on their comm screen. You need to see this. They rushed to Eloria's command center, where screens showed a massive fleet approaching not warships but civilian vessels, freighters, liners, all carrying the same message, seeking sanctuary. How many? Elias breathed. Over 3,000 ships, Theralis reported, from single families to entire communities. The Conclave's collapsed member worlds are choosing sides, old system or new. These are choosing us. We don't have infrastructure for this, Saria said, running calculations. Food, housing, medical. We'll make it work, Ceres declared, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd once ruled an empire. Every soul on those ships made an impossible choice to leave everything for freedom. We won't turn them away. How? Saria asked. The same way we've done everything, Elias said. Together, impossibly, one choice at a time. As the first ships landed, disgorging beings of every kind, seeking new lives, Elias's mind drifted to that moment in the auction chamber when he'd first stood up, no plan. Just outrage and a stubborn belief that people deserved better. Now watching former enemies work side by side, seeing children play free of genetic mandates, witnessing love bloom between beings, the old system would have kept apart. He understood they hadn't just broken a system. They'd built a new world, one where a failed diplomat and a former queen could stand as equals, where their impossible child could thrive, where choice trumped control. No regrets, Saris asked, echoing their familiar question as they watched their growing community. None, Elias said, except maybe not smuggling more coffee from Earth. I'm dying without it. Her laugh, bright as Eloria's dawn, rang out. I'll see what we can synthesize. Can't have my partner in galactic upheaval suffering withdrawal. You get me completely, he said, grinning. I choose to get you, she corrected, her voice warm. Every day. And that, Elias thought as he pulled her close, her presence, a steady anchor, was the true revolution, not the grandstands or public defiance, but the quiet daily choice to see others as people worthy of their own paths. The choice to love without permission, to build without blueprints, to hope without guarantees. The old galaxy ran on control breeding, contracts, and reducing beings to their genes. The new one they were forging ran on something far stronger, infinitely renewable choice. As the sun set over Eloria, their adopted world, their impossible home, Elias stood with his chosen family watching tomorrow's birth. It would be messy, imperfect, likely perilous. It would be beautiful, and it would be theirs.